Welcome to Rob Schmitt Tonight. I'm Todd Starnes filling in for Rob this evening. We begin tonight with a sobering message for people of faith. Christians are being targeted across America. Family Research Council released a report last year showing a nearly 800% increase in hostility and violence against churches and Christians. Congressman John Rose, the Republican now running to be Tennessee's next governor, writing on X, Christians and Catholic churches have faced a 730% surge in attacks since 2018. It's time to call this what it is, a siege against Christianity. Religious freedom must be defended at every level of government. And the attacks are becoming even more violent and more personal, and much of the blame is directed at the previous administration. The Democrats have turned a blind eye to the growing religious persecution here in America, and most of the hostility has been directed at Bible-believing Christians. Now, the transgender terrorist attack in Minneapolis, yet another tragic example of a confused and angry young man taking out his aggression on innocent children worshiping Jesus. He turned a sanctuary into a killing field. Now, the suspect, a man who thought he was a woman, he intentionally targeted children attending Catholic Mass. He hated God. He hated Trump. He hated his own life. Lawmakers have filled the airways with condemnation, but most of it directed at President Trump and law-abiding gun owners.
I'm so tired of some of my colleagues who won't stand up and vote for some stricter national gun standards.
This is a choice.
There has to be federal laws that are introduced that safeguard life in this country.
And not to be outdone, former Biden press secretary Jen Circleback Psaki, now a talk show host of the network previously known as MSDNC, turned on the waterworks.
All they should be hoping to do is have someone to sit with at lunch or someone to play with on the playground. And I have felt a mixture of anger and a lot of anger and emotional exhaustion about this today, as I'm sure many of you have, because we have been here so many times. And yet again, like clockwork, half of the politicians in our country have little more to offer than thoughts and prayers. We have seen this play out over and over again. There is a shooting, then come the thoughts and prayers, and then comes the attempt to shift the focus. This is what always happens. You're going to start seeing narratives. You're already seeing them. They're already out there.
Okay, first of all, Anchorman Don't Cry Man, not on national television. And let's get real. She's not crying for the children. No, she's crying because the mainstream media's narrative has been blown to smithereens. They really wanted the gunman to be a straight white guy wearing a MAGA hat and holding a Bible. But when it turned out to be a godless transgender Trump hater, well, the Democrats and the media switched gears and they blamed the Christians for praying.
And don't just say this is about thoughts and prayers right now. These kids were literally praying.
You know, we talked about thoughts and prayers and taking action when Columbine happened, back when I was in high school.
We've had it with the thoughts and prayers for years.
Yep.
Forget about thoughts and prayers. These kids were literally praying.
All right, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt had something to say about all of that.
I saw the comments of my predecessor, Ms. Psaki, and frankly, I think they're incredibly insensitive and disrespectful to the tens of millions of Americans of faith across this country who believe in the power of prayer, who believe that prayer works, and who believe that in a time of mourning like this, when beautiful young children were killed while praying in a church, it's utterly disrespectful to deride the power of prayer in this country, and it's disrespectful to the millions of Americans of faith.
Well, of course it is. She's absolutely right. And what the media and what the Democrats are doing here is absolutely disrespectful. The truth is that the rhetoric and the policies coming from the left have put the entire nation in jeopardy. Now, in 2019, the World Health Organization announced they would no longer recognize transgender issues as mental or behavioral disorders. There was no scientific or medical reason for the declassification. It was strictly done for political and cultural issues to appease the LGBT mob. It is absolutely heartbreaking to know that many people are dealing with issues like gender dysphoria, and they're no longer getting the psychiatric help they so desperately need. And now a shocking number are lashing out, targeting, among others, people of faith. Now, I say this not to be hateful, but the fact is that since the dawn of time, transgenderism has been something that needed to be treated, not celebrated or affirmed. Again, the policies of the Democrats are putting all of us in danger. Now, the New York Post reports that the Minneapolis shooter confessed in a handwritten journal that he was tired of being trans, that he wished he had never brainwashed himself. A horrible tragedy that could have been avoided had the gunman just been treated for his illness instead of being affirmed. But tonight we remember not the transgender terrorist, but the two children whose lives were snatched away. 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel, who loved fishing and cooking and sports, and 10-year-old Harper Moisky, remembered for her laughter and her kindness. We pray for their families, as well as the 15 children who were shot and the 3 adult parishioners, and we pray for the first responders and the doctors and the nurses. Fletcher's father offered a statement to the nation that reads in part, "Over the past day, I've heard many stories accounting the swift and heroic actions of children and adults alike from inside the church. Without these people and their selfless actions, this could have been a tragedy of many magnitudes more. For these people, I am thankful. Please remember Fletcher for the person he was and not the act that ended his life." You see, America, we pray not out of rote. We pray because Scripture tells us to petition the Almighty, to cast all of our cares on Him. And Scripture also tells us the prayers of a righteous man avail much. And that's why when the forces of darkness infiltrate our communities, people of faith pray without ceasing. And one final note, from the heart of Fletcher's dad, a word of counsel to moms and dads across our great nation tonight. Give your kids an extra hug and a kiss. Well, here to weigh in, CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp, along with Tony Perkins, President and CEO of the Family Research Council. Gentlemen, good to have you with us this evening. You know, this toxic ideology, guys, that's being pushed by the left is resulting in tragedy. The Minnesota shooting, just the latest example. Democrats want to blame the Christians and the gun owners. Despite new reporting, by the way, on the shooter's manifesto from the New York Post, the White House correspondent quoting the shooter as writing about the Annunciation School. It also seems like the kind of school to not arm their teachers. And I bet that liberal schools, they don't allow teachers to carry guns. As a matter of fact, back in June, another attempted mass shooting at a church in Michigan, thwarted by a security guard with a gun who killed him. Matt, your thoughts on what happened in Minneapolis?
Well, first, let's be clear. Prayer is action. It's one of the most important actions we can engage in. And usually, even they say there are no atheists in foxholes. Usually when you have great tragedy, even people who have a shallow faith or haven't been catechized, they know in those moments that they need a higher power to help them. And I'm not mad at the mayor for saying this. I'm not mad at the governor of California for dismissing the importance of prayer. Matter of fact, I think they need prayer too. I think it's a tragic thing when you have political leaders in this country who don't understand the very principles on which this nation was founded. And a big part of that is this idea of having non-government schools. I'm a Catholic. I went to Catholic schools. My kids all go to Catholic schools all the way through college. And this is a proud part of our educational system. And it is disgraceful that the governor of Minnesota and others view these Catholic schools differently than the public schools when it comes to these kids' safety. And I think that we've been having this conversation about hardening schools for way too long. I don't think we're going to solve all the psychological problems. Yeah. We could start by not lying to our kids anymore about gender changes and drugs and stop all of that nonsense. But why don't we protect our kids in these dangerous times?
Tony, Family Research Council, your organization, you guys did the study that found an 800% uptick in violence against churches from 2018 to 2023. Who is pushing this this narrative against evangelical churches and Catholic churches? And of course, you guys were the victims of a domestic terrorist attack there at your headquarters in D.C.
Well, there seems to be a correlation between the policies and the actions of individuals. We saw it really peaked in 2023 with the Biden administration, a lot of their anti-Catholic rhetoric, their anti-pro-life rhetoric, where they were actually tracking down pro-lifers and arresting them. And you look at what's happening in Minnesota. On Monday, Governor Tim Walz bragging about Minnesota being a sanctuary for transgenderism. And in fact, their laws prohibit young men like Robert from being able to get the help that he needed. They ban counseling. You cannot have gender dysphoria counseling unless it's affirming of your sexual confusion. And so what we see here, Todd, in Minneapolis is what we saw in Nashville, is that we see this is the result of, it's a manifestation of a hatred for God and for children. And it is being brought about by the left's rhetoric and their policies. And so these policies are deadly. And I advocate that we do pray. We also need to vote. We need to vote for men and women who recognize that there is a higher authority, and he is God, and have policies that reflect his truth. Look, we can't escape this. These policies are leading to deadly consequences for our children.
Yeah. Matt, real quick, and I want both of you to answer this question. How important was it for the administration to acknowledge this was a domestic terrorist attack and it was a deliberate attack against Catholics?
Yeah, very important. Mostly conservatives don't really differentiate between crimes. A crime is a crime, but Tony is exactly right. You're exactly right. CPAC is doing a lot of work on this front. There is an assault on Christians, not just in America, but all over the world. We have these terrible examples in Africa. It's time not only for Christians to stand up, demand that but all decent people. Why are Christians not talking about the idea that the governor of Minnesota thought it was just fine to disrespect Catholics and Christians so much by all of his policies, including the policy of not even letting kids get out of the womb up until moments before they would have a natural conception?
Tony, I want to give you the final thought here.
Well, Todd, the reason for our report is to raise awareness, not fear, and also to affirm the mission of the church. Yes, Jesus warned there was going to be hostility for those who followed him. So this is not a time to shrink back. This is not a time to become silent or to walk away in fear. It is time to stand firmly for truth, because if there was ever a generation that needed to be reached with the truth, we are now standing looking at that generation in the faiths.
All right, Matt Schlapp, Tony Perkins. Guys, thank you so much for being with us here on Newsmax tonight.
Thanks, Todd.
Thank you, Todd.
Well, Trump's crime crackdown proving to be a major success in D.C. He wants to clean up other cities, but Democrats, they're begging him not to. More with Dietl next. Welcome back. I'm Todd Starnes, filling in for Rob this evening. With crime drastically declining in D.C. amid Trump's crackdown on crime, he's pledged to help clean up more cities across America that are plagued by lawlessness. But the left, well, they don't want the problem fixed. Democrat governors begging him to back off his threats to deploy National Guard troops in places like Chicago, New York, and Boston. Despite people getting shot left and right in these Democrat-run, crime-infested places. In a letter signed by the Democratic Governors Association, it argues that Trump's deployment of soldiers ostensibly to aid in civilian law enforcement is unnecessary and illegal. The letter wrote, whether it's Illinois, Maryland, New York, or another state tomorrow, the president's threats and efforts to deploy a state's National Guard without the request and consent of that state's governor is an alarming abuse of power, ineffective, and undermines the mission of our service members. And remember, D.C. crime has gone way down since Trump's crackdown. Carjacking down, get this, 87%. Now, if Trump had not sent National Guard into L.A. during the recent riots, who knows how bad it could have gotten. But the Democrat Governors Association doesn't want to recognize that. They will always oppose Trump, so they will take the wrong side of this 90-10 issue and allow people to keep dying in their cities. Well, joining me now is the great Bo Dietl, Homeland Security Advisory Counsel to the President and a retired NYPD detective. Bo, good to have you with us this evening. So what does Trump do here next? What is the next step?
Well, I mean, you talk about New York City, for instance, when you have a mayor here that says their crime is going down, that tell it to the 4 people that were killed a couple of days ago in the Bronx, and so many people being shot. And then on top of it, we have a governor, another fool governor, Hochul. Oh, we don't want National Guard. Well, who the hell is in Grand Central, Penn Station, and on our train? There are thousands of National Guard people there. If you don't need them, we have a mayor that says, we don't need your help. Mr. Mayor, let me tell you about help. You remember, I was on the police department before you were, and I know about crime and these little jived around statistics that people like to play around with. If there's a shooting and no one's hit, they don't even label it as a shooting. They work on these different statistics. And then when you're talking about Chicago, you got this fool governor over there and the fool mayor over there. They're one person a day is getting killed there and dying. What is with the Democrats not wanting to help the people? The victims are the public. Why don't we want them? All we do is worry about the criminals, bail reform, no cash bail. I worry about the people that are the victims. Where the hell are the Democrats coming from when they're talking like this? Why wouldn't you want crime to go down?
Look, Bo, I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. We're the homicide capital of America, according to Kash Patel. And I interviewed President Trump last week on my national radio show. And he said, hey, look, we're thinking about even maybe sending some troops down to Memphis. Of course, now Boston's got big problems, and they may actually be the newest target in Trump's nationwide crime crackdown. According to an administration official, the president is preparing to send a surge of ICE agents to Boston in an immigration enforcement blitz in the coming weeks. Bo, the common denominator, Memphis, Boston, New York, Chicago, all run by far-left Democrats.
Yeah. You know, I'm very proud of my appointment by the president, and I support him 100%. His job he's doing. He's supposed to protect Americans, not just in wars across the seas. I'm talking about the wars that are going on with the criminal element in our country. And he's trying to do the best for Americans and for all the cities. And I hear some people in Chicago actually wearing Trump hats there. They want help in Chicago. They want the crime to go down. Oh, they're not robbing stores anymore because everything's locked up, and the stuff that's not locked up, the damn shelves are empty. Go into a CVS in Manhattan, you got nothing on the shelves. Oh, yeah. And you know what? They're not allowed to arrest misdemeanor when they're walking out. I've been around a long time, and I love this president, and people that don't like him don't understand one thing. He's doing his job. He's supposed to protect Americans, and that's what he's doing. And God bless him. And any liberal Democrats that don't know and don't understand you don't want to stop crime, then you got something wrong with you.
All right, Bo Dietl, you, sir, are a great American patriot. We got to leave it there. Thank you for coming on Newsmax this evening.
Great. Everybody have a good, safe weekend.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Bo. Well, according to a recent AP NORC poll, 53% of U.S. adults approve the way President Trump is dealing with crime. 53%. For more on this, let's bring in an advisor to President Trump, author of The Return, Trump's Big 2024 Comeback, a great book, our good friend Dick Morris. Dick, thank you for joining us. So, look, 53% of the country, President Trump's got the momentum here. How does the administration plan to build on it?
Well, he has the momentum and certainly is succeeding in Washington. But I think it's a dangerous thing. I think that as he expands this and sends troops into more cities, these are not trained police officers. And the odds that they will overreact and we might have a Rodney King or worse slaying on our hands like George Floyd, where the whole country goes crazy, those become substantial. And the more troops you deploy, the more that risk is. There is a better way to fight crime, risk-free, which is the reason the crime rate is exploding in these cities, is because the left has gotten the city and the state to agree to no bail policies, where you arrest the person and the next hour they're outside on the street, often while you're still processing the arrest. And what Trump needs to do is what his Secretary of Transportation has done, which is to say that we are not going to give you federal money unless you reform your bail laws. Duffy, the Secretary of Transportation, said that to the New York City subway system a few days ago. And cutting off federal funding to law enforcement officials and to police departments in order to force them really to repeal these liberal no bail laws, I think can have an enormous impact on the crime rate.
You know, during that marathon cabinet meeting the president held earlier this week, the president actually mocked Democrats for holding to positions that are deeply unpopular, like crime. Let's take a listen here.
And their new box that they've fallen into is crime. There was a consultant on one of the shows this morning I was watching. I thought he was very good. He's a Democrat consultant. And he was screaming, no, no, don't let him do this to you. Don't let, it's another trap. It's another trap. What he's talking about, like men playing in women's sports. They said that's an 80-20. No, it's a 97-3.
Dick, what is going on right now within the Democrat Party? They're taking the wrong side on these very unpopular issues with the American people.
Well, I think that they have been captured by the extreme left wing of their party. And historically, whenever a party, the Democrats, lose elections, they react by moving to the left, becoming more and more unacceptable. And these policies of not requiring bail, letting people out as soon as you arrest them, and not going after repeat offenders, these are not popular policies with voters, and they know it. But in their primaries, the Democratic left dominates, and they're all afraid of losing their seats to the likes of AOC or any of the extreme left candidates. And as a result, they end up taking positions that might get them nominated, but are not going to get them elected.
Wow. All right, Dick, I would love to continue the conversation, but we have to leave it there. Great book, by the way. Folks, you got to read it. Dick Morris, thank you.
Thank you.
And coming up, Cracker Barrel caves to backlash and ditches their rebranded logo. They're bringing the Cracker and the Barrel back. Their 93-year-old co-founder can't contain his criticism. That's coming up next.
Logo rolled out the other day.
Oh, that's crazy.
Cracker Barrel caves, and customers, well, they couldn't be happier. Scrapping, by the way, their terribly rebranded logo earlier this week, and sticking with the original, they brought back the old-timer Uncle Herschel, thanks to a heavy push by President Trump and their customers. Well, the new logo was simply horrendous. Check this out. It looked more like a tech company logo than the old country store serving up biscuits and gravy and sweet tea in the mason jars. Even the now 93-year-old co-founder of Cracker Barrel, Tommy Lowe, could not contain his criticism in a new interview, saying the crazy new logo was a waste of $700 million, and essentially says the woke new CEO of the company he co-founded has absolutely no idea what she's doing.
Logo rolled out the other day.
Oh, that's crazy. That's nothing. That's a bland nothing. It's pitiful.
Do you think she knows the story of Cracker Barrel?
I don't think so. I heard she was a Taco Bell, but what's Taco Bell know about a Cracker Barrel? Spending $700 million to do that is all I've been doing. I just throwing money out the street.
Sweet mercy, America. Well, Jennifer Say is the founder and CEO of XXYY Athletics and a former executive at Levi's. She joins us now along with former White House Principal Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley. Jennifer, let's start with you. You're a CEO. I'm not sure if you're a Cracker Barrel fan. I've been around the biscuits and gravy quite a bit over there at that joint, and I just don't get all this. Does the buck stop with the CEO, and does she need to get the heave-ho here?
Well, I don't think she'll get the heave-ho, but the buck should stop with her. She violated the first rule of brand management, which is know the customer, know your customer, respect the customer. I think she came in, a fancy MBA type person from the coast and thought, I know what they like. I'm going to voice my aesthetics and my values on this customer. And rather than sit down with the founder, which is what I would have done, and sit down with actual customers that love Cracker Barrel in places like Alabama and Arkansas, she just decided on her own. And she created something that was totally bland. And it's not just the logo. It was the entire restaurant redesign. And they did a pop-up in the meatpacking district, which is one of the hippest neighborhoods in New York. And I guarantee you there's not a lot of Cracker Barrel fans there. So it's just, he's right. It's just burning money, throwing money away. And they had to retract it. They had to eventually listen to the customer, which is what they should have done up front.
Yeah, look, Hogan, you're a Southern guy. You know Cracker Barrel. This was doomed from the start. And I said back when they introduced plant-based sausage to the menu and then they started serving beer, nobody drinks beer with the biscuits and gravy, Hogan Gidley.
No question. Look, Cracker Barrel is one of those institutions where you're driving down the road, you see it, you know what you get. Every time you go in there, you get good food at great prices. There's a family atmosphere. It's very kitschy with the stuff hanging on the wall. They wanted to rebrand all of those things and change the store, what made it successful. You don't break something, or don't fix something, rather, if it's not broken. And this hasn't been broken for a long time. People love the place. And so the nostalgia is there for something. This has been a long time establishment that people love, that people cherish. It's such a great beacon to be traveling down the road and see it. And when they try to change something like that, it takes away kind of the heart and soul of the business. And you saw the founder say, wait a minute, what is this logo? What does it mean? It's just so bland. It's a bland nothing. Absolutely correct. Look like a belt buckle, actually, you'd buy somewhere with just the words Cracker Barrel. Really, really bad idea. But thankfully, that CEO, who clearly is out of touch, did listen to the consumer and go back to what was working.
She had the glasses, guys. That was the dead giveaway. You can see the glasses and say, this woman's woke. I mean, that's what it's. Look, there she is. Hey, Jennifer, look, first they came after poor Aunt Jemima. Then they came after Uncle Ben and the Indian chick there on the Lanza Lakes butter thing. And now poor Uncle Herschel. Do you think, though, that maybe, just maybe, they're understanding that woke will eventually lead to broke?
I would argue in this case, it's more sort of elitist tastes, and woke sits under that, but it's their elitist tastes from New York City and Los Angeles that they're forcing on the consumer. And, wokeism is a facet of elitism. It's like an accessory, like a Gucci handbag, to kind of tout your own fancy values. I don't know that they're going to learn yet. I think we have a while. They have not only retracted the very bland and very boring logo, which looked like something I would do in PowerPoint. I'm not that good at PowerPoint. But they've also taken down all of their employee resource groups and DEI policies and sponsorship of a pride parade for children, I think. So they're definitely backpedaling, but I think it remains to be seen whether they are truly listening and truly understand, or if it's cosmetic.
All right, guys, we got to leave it there. Jennifer Say, Hogan Gidley, guys, thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right, coming up, a major CDC shakeup as President Trump and RFK Jr. work to make America healthy again, not a Cracker Barrel. The liberal media losing their minds over the firing of CDC Director Susan Menarez. That's next.
Just in from the CDC, the sudden shakeup, the new director on the job for just weeks, tonight ousted.
The tumult at the CDC visible outside its Atlanta headquarters.
President Trump has removed Dr. Susan Menarez as the head of the Centers for Disease Control.
Top officials are resigning en masse after sudden changes to COVID vaccine policies.
They do not share the president's vision, particularly when it comes to the Make America Healthy Again agenda. Their jobs could be in jeopardy.
Well, the fossil media is erupting as President Trump and RFK Jr. stick to their promise of making America healthy again, while simultaneously restoring public trust in our nation's health agencies. The media wants you thinking that the CDC is in utter chaos right now, but in reality, one bureaucrat, got fired about a month into the job, and a few other bureaucrats under her resigned. Now, they nearly rolled out the red carpet for the people who quit. Some partisan employees are protesting as the fake news works to spin a CDC in crisis, a phony narrative. One of the CDC staffers who resigned is Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis, the one with the flowers there. You might remember him as Biden's monkeypox guy. Ew. This should jog your memory.
Monkeypox is a rare disease that is caused by infection with monkeypox virus. Avoid close contact with anyone who has monkeypox or has a rash that looks like monkeypox. Avoid close contact with others, including having sex or being intimate.
Ugh. All right, that's the guy. He's the one who wrote one of the reasons for his CDC resignation online. The recent change in the adult children's immunization schedule threatened the lives of the youngest Americans and pregnant people. I think he means women there, but all right, there you go. He also signed off with his pronouns, which allegedly are he, his, and him. Here's a look at, oh golly, here's a look at just some of the photos from Dr. Dimitri's social media. Put on a shirt, sir. Nobody wants to see that. I don't, geez, Lou. Anyway, I don't think there are photos of my doctor like that online. I certainly hope not. Regardless, the mainstream media has been forcing everyone to listen to this guy complain since last night.
CDC is being weaponized. Something is wrong in the U.S. with public health. You cannot dismantle it and expect it to function. Something is extremely wrong and dangerous in this country.
If CDC is being characterized as troubled by Secretary Kennedy, I think we have to turn the mirror back to him, because I think that the trouble is emanating mainly from him.
All right. Well, here with analysis and hopefully fully clothed, the director of the Heritage Foundation's Richard and Helen Tabas Center for Human Flourishing, Dr. Jay Richards, along with former FDA medical officer, Dr. David Gortler. Guys, wow. Dr. Gortler, what the heck is going on at the CDC?
Gosh, you know, I really couldn't say. And the funny thing is, I don't think anybody really knows what happened during that meeting with RFK and Dr. Morones, right? I mean, if only I could have been a fly on that wall and heard what happened. And the employees who are walking out, they don't know exactly what transpired there either. Yet, strangely enough, you know, they were only too eager to run outside and start screaming at cars and seemed to have freshly picked flowers ready to go and pre-printed signs, you know, just ready to be displayed for everybody. But they don't know exactly what transpired. Nobody really knows. They're giving very generic reasons of why they're walking out, and I find that pretty alarming.
You know, Dr. Richards, I'm curious about your read on the situation. Do you think these are good moves the Trump administration is making at CDC?
I think that this is called for. I mean, the reality is, as Dr. Gortler said, we don't know exactly what happened internally. We got a lot of data from the outside, the protests, the comments from former Director Menarez, for instance. It's quite clear that she's opposed to the general Make America Healthy Again agenda, that she's got an animus, I think, toward the HHS Secretary Kennedy. And that was the conventional wisdom, in any case, from the very beginning. He didn't get the actual director he wanted, Bill Weldon. He was sort of stuck with this one. The assumption was that she's frankly another swamp creature that's been there and would probably do the bidding of pharmaceutical industry. But Secretary Kennedy actually gave her the benefit of the doubt. He said very nice things about her. She was nominated, and it's quite clear that either she was directly opposing and obstructing, or I can tell you the word on the street from some people that were at CDC is that she was just slow walking everything. It's not that she was actively impeding. She was just not really performing, which is, of course, anyone that's in Washington knows that's precisely how people in the administrative state act if they want to prevent something from happening.
Yeah.
And it's
All
really,
right,
it's not right.
Dr. Richards, Dr. Gordon. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Guys, I wish we could. No, you're good. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there, guys. But great analysis. Doctors, thank you again.
You bet.
All right, President Trump revokes Kamala's Secret Service just in time for her book tour. We'll talk about that next. Time now for news from the left. President Trump has revoked Kamala Harris's taxpayer-funded Secret Service detail. Traditionally, VPs have 6 months of protection following their term. However, her protection was apparently extended by President Biden before he left office, or his auto pen did it, who knows. CNN obtaining a copy of Trump's letter saying, "You are hereby authorized to discontinue any security-related procedures previously authorized by executive memorandum, beyond those required by law for the following individual, effective September 1, 2025, former Vice President Kamala D. Harris." Well, the move comes as Kamala is set to go on her book tour. The new book, by the way, called 107 Days, which is probably just full of excuses, blaming the short campaign for her loss. Let's not forget Kamala was a huge advocate for defunding the police, saying it's wrong that more police will create more safety. Just watch this.
Are you for defunding the police?
How are you defining defund the police? It is outdated and is actually wrong and backward to think that more police officers will create more safety. The status quo thinking has been to believe that by putting more police on the street, you're going to have more safety. And that's just wrong. If for too long, the status quo thinking has been you get more safety by putting more cops on the street. Well, that's wrong.
Well, okay, so why are you pitching a hissy fit, ma'am? I mean, if the problem is the police, why do you need a security detail? Either pay it for yourself or live like the rest of us peasants. Well, joining us now is Newsmax contributor Chris Coles and MRC Director of Marketing and Communications Iris Miller. Chris, starting with you. Kamala and husband Dougie, multimillionaires. It seems to me they ought to be forking over the money for their own security. What say you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The reality is that they don't need Secret Service protection of any kind. Conservatives, we just do not produce violent activists, violent extremists like the left does. That's the job of the left. But the reason the left is freaking out right now, I think, is because of the optics. The left wants to appear to be serious people, serious politicians. I made a video last year called the Kamala Harris campaign ad parody video. It was a funny video. Elon Musk retweeted it. It got something like 700 million impressions on X. It went super viral. And what was the response of the left? It wasn't to laugh it off. No. Gavin Newsom signed a law banning my videos because they cannot, be laughed at. They have to be taken absolutely seriously. And Secret Service protection is one of those things that makes them look important, makes them look like serious people. So I actually think this is all about optics. And if they spent as much time trying to actually be serious politicians and improve the nation as much as they do trying to appear to be serious people, I think that they would fare a lot better.
Yeah. Iris, Senator Adam Pencilneck Schiff posted his reaction to President Trump. Here's what he wrote online. Another dangerous reminder that there's no agenda more important to Donald Trump than retribution, makes their targets more vulnerable. Is this retribution?
This is straight out of the left-wing media's playbook. If anyone at CNN, ABC, or NBC did an intro as perfect as you just did, Todd, then people would know what's really happening. That her service should be expired after 6 months, that Biden extended it. Why does Kamala Harris need more time from Secret Service when she's a has-been? She's doing a book tour that no one cares about, and the Secret Service people would probably add a couple more people to her book tour, and that's about it. She doesn't need the protection, and it's a waste of taxpayer money, but the media are lying to everyone, and they're not giving the important context that you did, that this is precedent. It's Biden who is trying to give her extra protection for who knows what reason.
Chris, speaking of people nobody cares about, Rosie O'Donnell, now living in Ireland. Our thoughts and prayers for the Irish. Her daughter, who identifies as a they, them, reacted to the trans Minneapolis shooting this week. Let's watch this.
And what do you know? It was a white guy, Republican, MAGA person. What do you know? White supremacist.
All right, Chris, 20 seconds, your reaction.
You know, I've got an unusual take on this. I watched this video and I noticed, why does Rosie O'Donnell always sit so close to the camera? Okay, nobody really wants to see that anymore. There was a movie called The Neverending Story in the 80s. There was a turtle character in that movie, kind of decrepit, reminds me of Rosie O'Donnell. She's got to stand back a little bit from that camera. Obviously, she's lying because that's the only talking points that the left has anymore. They can't tell the truth because if they do, they're always going to lose. So they've got to lie and try to trick people into thinking things that just aren't true.
All right, Chris, Iris, we're going to have to leave it there, guys. Thank you for joining us on Newsmax. Folks, we'll be right back with final thoughts and exclusive photos of my visit this week to the Oval Office. Finally, tonight, with the Labor Day weekend upon us, we celebrate the contributions of American workers and have some recent major victories in Trump's economy to report. This is the lowest Labor Day gas day prices in 5 years. Hotel rates and car rentals also at a 5-year low. Mortgage rates at a 10-month low, making housing more affordable. Well, I was honored to be able to visit President Trump in the Oval Office this week. The president more than gracious with his time. Last week, he made some news on my national radio show announcing that his plan for a nationwide crackdown on crime. The president also sat with me for an interview we featured in my book, Twilight's Last Gleaming, Can America Be Saved? The answer is yes, and President Trump shows us how to do that in my book, and I'd love for you to read a copy at your favorite bookstore. You can also get a copy online at Amazon. Well, thank you for joining us tonight on Newsmax. Have a great Labor Day weekend. Bennerty is next.
You know, everybody's reporting the same stories, the same spin. You turn the channel, it's always the same. But not us. We're different. We report the real news. No spin, just the facts. Turn to us, and you won't turn back.
Tune in to Rob Schmitt tonight on Newsmax.